This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everyone. Planning is everything. I'm sure you've heard that before, and that definitely applies to your life and afterlife, I guess, if you want to call it that. And I'm not talking about the afterlife, which some believe in. I'm talking about when you're no longer here and your assets get passed on and life does go on. Got a plan for that. We're going to get some insight today. She is just a super insightful estate attorney and has so much insight. And today we're going to look at some of the things she's done, things that may have presented, things that we might want to circumvent around, and so much more. Julie Schejbal is back with us. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Steve. How about yourself?
Great, great. And I'm a firm believer in stories. Everybody's got a story. You could go to Starbucks and there's a story just even walking in and how they made your coffee and just the experience, who you saw, what you met.
Exactly.
I'm sure you've got some stories of people you've worked with and maybe some things that presented. And the reason I'm bringing this up is we learn from these stories.
Right.
Yeah. Tell us.
So I think hopefully I'm going to start with a couple of cautionary tales and maybe end with a couple of more positive things that really don't necessarily weren't impactful from a legal standpoint, but, kind of brighten my day up for a change.
Sure.
So the first thing I start with is like sort of this idea of things that have happened where, people haven't been aware of the assets that mom or dad or their friend had or whatever. And that all of a sudden they've created these random surprises that have been, kind of extraordinary. Actually, that I had a couple of cases where money and property went to lost property. One was a gentleman, I handled his estate. He'd been in a facility for a long time. Kids didn't know, were estranged from him. Working through it, look through lost property, find out that he has some, send out the paperwork. And normally you think that's going to be, loose change, maybe $1,000, maybe $2,000, but often it's not enough to really, almost the juice is almost not worth the squeeze, right? Well, this check comes back and I look at it and I'm like, oh, there's a 3 and a 2. Oh, it was $3,200. That's pretty good. No, it was like $320,000. This guy had misplaced.
Wow. And where did you see that, the correct amount?
So I actually paid a little more attention to the check. I could actually see the zeros behind the 3 and the 2, but my initial reaction was, oh, it's, whatever. Because usually it's like, loose change.
Yeah.
And, and then I had one, and I guess embarrassingly, I was handling the estate for this gentleman, and he, we thought we had all of his assets together, and I think I finished that up like 10 years ago, and I get a letter from a securities outfit, and they say, well, he had funds with us. I had my assistant sort of look down what it was, and again, it was like $320,000, but I think, or over 300. And I think in that case, we just never got any paperwork to indicate that he had this fund, like no 1099s or no statements. And he was not somebody who was a relative of mine. He was just a client that I was handling things for. So, sometimes you get these sort of random things that happen.
So in that situation, time had gone by. You had already set things up for him. Everything was good to go. And then you come to find out after he was gone?
Yeah, this was after he died. Yeah.
Oof. So
we finished the initial probate like 10 years ago. And this was so not only had I set stuff up, he had died. And then 9 years or 10 years after we had finished everything, this plopped in my lap.
Wow. 300 and something thousand.
Yeah.
Now what?
Well, we had to we were going through the process again, not entire process, but we had to, have to go through it. We're going to be sending eventually checks out to his beneficiaries, who I'm sure will be somewhat happy to get some of this. But in the interim, some of these people I think have died. So there's a little bit of, where are we going to send that money?
But, so questions on that. this appears out of nowhere.
How do you
And
lose $300,000? That's generally my first question.
yes, and how is it figured out where that money's going to go? Because it wasn't determined when he was around where he wanted it to go.
So we look at his will, and often when I do a will for somebody, it'll say, X percent or X dollars to Julie. If Julie's not around, here's where the money is going to go. It's going to go to children, or, my, sometimes it'll go to, some parents will say, if one of my kids isn't around, it goes to their children, or it goes to my surviving children. So you just sort of look back at the will to determine where should go.
Hmm.
And
It seems a little potentially dicey in that I guess you just follow what the previous protocol was, and that
right.
it's just more money coming to those who initially received whatever he had.
Right. But because I think also, but you have to like sometimes find these people because it's been, 10 years, people move on. So it's a little bit of a looking into a black hole to find where this money and property should be going.
And who does that?
So it's up to me, and and yeah, we sometimes have to hire like a search firm to say, hey, can you find where Steve is living now? Because maybe the letter comes back and you're not clearly living at 1313 Mockingbird Lane anymore.
I know where that is.
Yeah.
Like it's almost as if you turn into Julie CSI. You got to
A little bit,
put
yeah.
it all together. And all right, initially when you told me that, I was like, oh, okay. But if you can, I guess, follow what was done previously, it's just more money. And it seems like 10 years later or so, the challenge
Right.
is finding those people.
That's pretty much what it is. It's just
Wow.
sort of okay. We have this additional money. Where is it going at that point? And
Gotcha.
it's just in this case, it's the length of time is creating the bigger challenge.
Got it. Wow. Stuff you don't realize.
Exactly.
What if, along these lines, what if somebody had investments? Yeah, let's say a couple of mil, whatever it is, just hypothetical here. And that was figured out, but they also had money stashed, safe deposit box or something like that. But that wasn't accounted for in the initial investments. Maybe that came to light, the safe deposit box. I don't even know how that works. What would happen?
Well, so you're trying to find this stuff, and sometimes it's difficult. Like usually like around tax time, we do get hints because you'll get 1099s from the various places that you have investments,
Sure.
and you can see sometimes like there'll be a line item in the bank account for the safe deposit box fee or something like that. So, or you go to the
Ah,
bank and say, hey, I'm trying to here to claim this person's accounts. And then the bank manager may say, oh, well, he or she has a safe deposit box. So sometimes it's a little bit like, discover and land on it. But where you get into problems, I think, was like if you have a stock. This happened to me one time. I had a client who'd been taking care of his aunt for years. So he was very, very well versed on what she had, paying her bills, making investment decisions, all this stuff. She died. We took care of what we thought everything was done. About a year later, he came in and he goes, oh, look what I found. Or look what came in the mail. And she had some stock that he now had a check for some dividends. And I'm like, well, I looked through the paperwork. We didn't have it on the account or anything. We didn't have any, evidence of it. Turned out the letter says, oh, we are very happy to issue a dividend for the first time in like 10 years. So I think that because they hadn't been issuing any dividends, it never was on this guy's radar. It just sort of was like out there wafting in the wind or whatever.
now, final question: safe deposit box. How
Yeah,
is that? In your detective work, you might find within a bank account a charge for the safe deposit box, $100 a year, whatever it
right.
is. So that's a
Yeah.
tip off. Oh, we have something there. What is the legal protocol to go in it after somebody passed and let's say they didn't have a will?
So you would take whoever's the personal representative. So let's just go next of kin. They would go in there and you go through, you present your, evidence of your appointment to the bank manager, and then you go through whatever protocol is there. I mean, I think I've only been into a safe deposit box like once or twice in my entire career. And I think they, make you sign and they watch.
Oh yeah.
What I remember clearly, one was opened in a particularly contentious estate that I had. So everybody's watching this get opened. And I'm like, literally, you watch the stuff come out. And I'm like, I think this guy just went in every once in a while, opened his safe deposit box and put whatever was in his pocket in there because it was just like
Nominal.
yeah, it wasn't gold bars. It was like, some foreign currency and, stuff like that. I was like, wow, this was really not, was a waste of time, essentially.
You know what it reminds me of? I don't. You said 1313 Mockingbird Lane,
Right.
so in memory. You remember when Geraldo Rivera did this big TV show where
The
they
Al
would
Capone vault.
yes, and then a whole big build up and everything. It was like record
Right.
viewing and everything. There's nothing in it.
Right, exactly. When they're like an old bottle of, like they found an old empty Scotch bottle or something. It was like
Exactly.
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What other stories can you share with us?
So another one is sort of I've had problems, where people don't finalize things after somebody has died. So I have a case where I didn't handle the initial one. The mom died. The brother was handling all the work for the mom, and the real estate was supposed to get, her mom's house was supposed to get transferred to this brother. He never finalized it. He never did a deed. So he continues, he was living in the home. He continues to live there. He's paying the utilities. He's paying the real estate taxes. No one's really focused on whether the deed is in the brother's name. Then, of course, brother died. And when I mean brother, he's actually the son, but he was the brother of everybody, the younger generation. So I get hired to handle his probate. Of course, he didn't have a will. And we go get ready. We're not paying too much attention to the deed. We get ready to sell the real estate. And oops, it's still in mom's name. And the only person who had the ability to sign for mom is now dead. So we had to go through and end up petitioning the court to get my personal representative, my client, appointed so he could handle the sale of the real estate. I mean, fortunately, we had a patient buyer. They were willing to wait for us to go through all of these, hoops. But it was sort of like, okay, why did you guys handle it, at the on the top end or the front, at the back end or whatever you want to say.
Wow. This really gets deep and can get in the weeds. And
Yeah.
this is why you really should plan. My gosh. You worked all your life, for these assets, and now,
Right.
oof. I knew you had challenges along the way, but I never saw it
Right.
this way of things that present. And do you find it makes it exciting when these things come up?
I think it does add a little bit of spice because, it's not the everyday kind of thing. And then you do kind of feel a little, pat yourself on the back when you kind of figure out the solution,
Right.
and particularly when the solution actually works, then it is kind of rewarding, I think.
What about where there is strife within a family and those situations? That's got to be probably, I would think, one of the diciest, more challenging situations for you. Anything come to mind where there was a little bickering going back and forth?
Oh, well, there's, yeah, little would be kind of soft pedaling it. Yeah, like I have a case now where we're trying to, the family had like 500 acres or more of farmland, and we're trying to divide it. And client would like some land because she and her husband do farming. The other siblings are very resistant to her getting any of the land. And, um, and I'm looking at it now. I grew up in a city or a suburb. I still live in a suburb where everything is on a quarter acre. So to me, I have, I'm just like, okay, there's a lot of land here. Can we not distribute it? And the other siblings are like, oh, we don't want them to get any land. We just look at it and go, well, there's plenty here. We could kind of carve it out and you guys can get whatever you want and sell it. And it's going to court and we're bickering about it. And, it's just terrible.
It's going to say it. Money changes things.
Right.
Within families.
Exactly.
It's what are the rule? Never do business with a family member. That's what people say. And money changes things. Like it brings out certain sides of people that might not have been displayed there, even within a family dynamic.
I think so. Although I think some of it there's maybe not to the extent that you realize it when somebody dies, but there are hints there if all along. People don't totally change their behavior.
Yeah, it sounds like there were low-lying rifts within the family members, and then when something like this happens, escalates, and challenge.
Exactly. I think it just it's sort of like mom and dad keep are able to keep people. I don't know if in line, but people I think will behave better while mom and dad are alive because they maybe don't want to rock the boat or as their parents get older they don't want them to be concerned, but once you release that it does explode a lot.
Expectations, that's really what it is, to have that when mom and dad pass,
exactly
what the expectation of the other family members would be. What about talking about planning, what about planning for your funeral? Very expensive, or can be. Can that be determined as well through estate planning?
So, yeah, I mean, I tell people because sometimes clients will come in and they'll say, hey, I want, this, I want to be buried here, or I want I want to be cremated and I want my ashes scattered in this local softball field or whatever. And I'm always like, all right, look, first of all, I don't think it's legal to scatter your ashes in this softball field.
Yep.
So, but whatever you do under the cover of darkness and don't get caught is okay. But I also tell them I'm not going to put these instructions in a will that's going to be filed for public record. It's not, broadcast it. The other thing is I do think writing extensive funeral instructions in your will is quite possibly the worst place you could put it. Because you don't generally look at the will till after the funeral's over. So,
great point.
We buried Steve and he wanted to be cremated. We can unring that. We can't unring the cremation.
That's a really great point. Didn't think of that because this is a immediate at need situation when somebody passes.
Right.
Nobody's thinking about going to the will to see what. Not everybody puts their final wishes in a will. So, why would you even think to look there? Wow, interesting. Anything stand out in your mind, Julie, about unusual requests? Where a rug's going to go and things like that.
Well, people have said that. And again, I'm like sort of along the lines of the funeral too, that my recommendation is always, if you want where your rug's going to go or, your Alex Ovechkin bobblehead, just make a list and just leave it near your will and say, okay, I hope you follow it. Now that list is not binding. So if your rug doesn't go to Steve, Steve can't go into court and waive this letter. But I would say that the idea, most of the stuff in your house, not worth all that much. The value is in the sentimental, the family, emotional value to the family.
Yeah.
So, often I've said to people, well, you can make it binding. I'll put it in your will, but just remember, if you want to change it, you've got to pay me or somebody else to change your will. And it's probably the attorney's fees are probably going to exceed the value of this rug.
Point.
So, let's just do it kind of a easy peasy memo flexible idea.
Gotcha. So what I'm getting from you, Julie, is if it doesn't have monetary value, then rethink it. we're talking about these sentimental value type items. Okay. Wow.
Right.
Any other
I can tell you a
stories?
story too. Once
Oh yeah, let's hear
well, I
it.
got one. So based on this one, I had a client. She had immigrated from Germany, and so she was living here. And I did not do this well. I didn't. I only met. I only did the work, the probate work after she had died. But she had left all of her jewelry to her grandchildren who still live in Germany. So I'm getting sort of toward the end. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to ship this to Germany, I'm probably should insure it, take it, get it insured, get it appraised so I can insure it. The appraiser comes back with like $10,000 or something. It wasn't like fabulous jewelry, but I'm like, all right. So then I said to my, and then we found out that we could not send it through the postal service because postal service, we wanted to send it like return receipt. Postal service can't make a German citizen sign their return receipt.
Mm.
But we figured out we can ship it through I think it was DHL or one of the services. So I send my assistant out. Said, we're going to send it, figure out how much it is. We'll get it insured. And she's gone, Steve, for what appears to be a very long time. And I'm like, what's going on? She comes back. She said, Julie, they couldn't figure out how to do it. Like, all right. They said they're calling corporate. They're going to get back to us. Well, they got back to us later that afternoon. Apparently, there's a treaty that forbids us from shipping jewelry back to Germany. I'm like, now what do we do? And we started like,
Wow.
think of different, ways to do it. I even emailed the children and grandchildren in Germany who either were fabulous at English or had a great translator app. I don't know what, but said, do you know anybody like, I'm really grasping at straws. Do you know anybody like in France? I'll ship it to France. You can go pick it. Oh, we don't know anybody who doesn't live in Germany. So finally she says, just sell it and just send us the money. I'm like, perfect.
Like now you're Julie's pawn shop.
Exactly. Well, that was it. So I go to a local, I like, all right, where am I going? I go to a local jewelry store who says we buy jewelry in relatively like in Annapolis, which is a relatively large city. Well, they bought it. They bought it for the value of the gold in the jewelry on the day that I sold it. So instead of something that was worth 10,000, I think we got it like 3,000 for it. So, and then I shipped the money off. But the moral of the story is nothing is worth what you think it is.
OMG. What a story. Thanks for sharing. This just shows, the effort, work, and passion you put into what you're doing and that responsibility. Now it's on you to make sure you get the most value for that jewelry for them.
Right.
And there's a lot of shops out there that, might not coach us. You don't know unless it's a very close friend. And so you're just going with what you got. But
exactly. I mean, I was like, yeah.
At least you got some money back, for them. And again,
exactly, that was what I was happy about. But
yeah, and it was their choice. That was their choice. Wow, what an eye opener!
Exactly.
So many moving parts, and again, this is the dedication you put into this. Best way to reach you? It's the state of Maryland that you work with people. What's your website?
Exactly. It's www.jasestate, that's ESTATE law.com.
Thank you for sharing these stories today and all the insight.
Sure.
I know there's a lot of work that goes into estate planning. We took it to new levels today of, if you don't pre-plan, what could possibly happen? I appreciate it. And we'll catch up next time.
Thanks, Steve. You have a wonderful day.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.